What's up, everybody? Welcome into the F6 Football Podcast. Cam Copeland here with Alex Roglin. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I am not alone. That's right. We are finally bringing in another special guest wearing his Pittsburgh Steelers jersey. Lifelong fan, lifelong friend. And Jared, we are excited to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's great to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, man. And Alex, how about you?
I'm doing well, Cam. Thank you. It's been another fun week of football. You know, we're starting to learn every week. We learn just a little bit more, and I'm really excited to have Jared on the podcast with us here tonight. As a reminder, the last fan we had was a Jets fan, and it was a great show. But then then Aaron Rodgers thing happened. So we're obviously, that was a one-off. Don't worry, Jared. It's not bad luck. I'm sure Kenny Pickett will be just fine. So why don't you kick us off, Cam? Give us a little introduction of Jared, and let's get this thing going.
All right. Well, Jared and I first met when we were around 4 or 5 years old, and now we are bordering 30. So we've stayed in touch over the years. Jared actually is a big reason I got into football. He'd always come over in high school and introduce me to NFL Red Zone. We started playing fantasy football together when we were, 10, 12-ish?
Yeah, 2007, 2008, around there.
Yeah.
Maybe
so, it's really been, we always talk pretty much every single day throughout the football season, and then a lot about draft stuff in the offseason and whatnot. So it's really is a big part of our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's really good to have him on the show. You know, we love bringing fans on the show, and he knows more football than just about anyone else I know. So looking forward to picking his brain a bit when it comes to his team, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, and I will say I've gone, I think just like you, Cameron, in and out of being, from the spectrum of, being just a casual football fan, just watching my team, into I know what you guys are both into as far as breaking down film, breaking down matchups and things like that. I feel like right now I'm somewhere in the middle. So I think it'll be a good, opportunity to, mix up the opinions here.
Yeah. And, he said, as we've both sort of gone in and out of our fandom throughout our lives. Fun little story. Back maybe 8 years ago or so, we were living together, and I wasn't as into football at the time. I was doing some fantasy football, but he'd have Red Zone on the big TV, and we'd have a smaller TV right next to it, and I'd be playing Assassin's Creed on the small TV with football next to it. So good times, but I'm glad to be back in the swing of football here.
You've come so far.
Absolutely. That was an awesome introduction. So I guess to get us into the first, what we, as you know, Jared and the other fans that we have with us here, we start off by recapping the previous week and we go through our upset picks. And then of course we focus on the coming week, and we'll certainly do a little extra focus on the Steelers here tonight. So I guess to kick us off, what were your thoughts of the kind of topsy-turvy Ravens Steelers game? I did get a chance to watch that game. It was a nice physical battle, as I think is usually expected. But, why don't you recap the game for us and just share some of your thoughts from a Steelers perspective?
Yeah. So, just off the bat, it's classic Steelers and classic Tomlin for the last couple of years. Everyone's calling for Tomlin's head. Of course, even before that, everyone's been calling for Matt Canada's head. And then, of course, Tomlin gets the guys ready to go and comes in. And it's the classic, got to throw out the record books when you go against division rivals, especially the Ravens. I feel like when I'm watching Steelers games and the Steelers go down early, like they frequently do or frequently have over the last couple of years, my friends think I'm delusional because I'll be like, nope, we got them right where we want them. It's a classic Tomlin spot. We're just going to keep playing defense. And in the fourth quarter, we're going to turn it up, actually open up the playbook. And then, Ben Roethlisberger, now Kenny Pickett, is going to have a couple flashes that end up winning us the game. So I can go through a couple of my thoughts, but I don't know if you guys have just any other, general thoughts about the game first.
Yeah. I definitely want you to share your thoughts. Just watching the game, it seems like each and every week, something ugly happens on the offensive side of the Steelers game, and something looks wrong, whether it's the blocking or Kenny Pickett or someone dropping a ball. Nothing seems to be going right. And then you look at the scoreboard when the clock hits 0 and it doesn't make sense. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Alex, do you have anything to go over?
Yeah, just a couple of the, one of the things is that we do in the show is I know, Cam does a lot more of the deep dive and the tape stuff. I'm more of like the kind of the eye test guy. That's what I'll call myself, the eye test guy. And one thing I did get a chance to watch this game. And it was an entertaining game, even though it was low scoring. I thought it was an entertaining game. The thing that stood off the page to me the most was, I don't know how many times I was like, why don't the Steelers throw the ball to someone else other than a running back out of the backfield? I mean, it felt like that whole second half, every time there was a 3rd and long, it was either like a really shallow route or a running back that Pickett would find. And I don't know if guys weren't open downfield, but that kept jumping off the screen to me as I'm like, man, like stop throwing the ball short of the sticks. You got to give your receivers a chance. And then sure enough, the biggest play of the game, Pickett does, unleashes it, trusts his arm, finds Pickens down the sideline, and certainly was the biggest play of the game. So that was, I thought, kind of interesting to me, was to see that, the most success that I think the offense had, or at least the most explosive play, was when Pickett really leaned into and just trusted his instincts and his arm instead of just trying to dump it off to running backs the whole game. But that was my eye test. What did you think about that, Jared? Did you notice that, or do you think that I'm a little off there?
No, that's exactly what I was getting at. I'm with the majority of Steelers fans, maybe all of the Steelers fans at this point, in saying that Canada's play calling is trash. I'll read you guys a quote from Ben Roethlisberger, who obviously at least knows a little bit of what he's talking about on Matt Canada's offense. Yesterday in his podcast, he said, "Where are the concept routes? Where's a curl route? I haven't seen a 12-yard curl route, which is a staple in the NFL, not even just in the NFL, in college, in a football game, a 12-yard curl route. Or how about a 10-yard hitch route, 5 yards? Where are those routes? Conceptual passing." So just like you noticed, Alex, the play calling is so basic, so vanilla at the beginning of games. And I think it goes back to Tomlin's strategy going into, and I do have to attribute it to Tomlin, because over, the last 4 offensive coordinators, going all the way back to Todd Haley, Randy Fichtner, now Matt Canada, Bruce Arians before that, like the last 6-7 years have been us going into games, trying to see if the defense can step up, win us the game. And if not, that's exactly it. The pass to George Pickens towards the end of the game. That's when we finally open up the offense, stop running just those, plays to the running back in the flat. And I don't know if either of you saw the route tree from George Pickens from this last game, but it's just a parabola. It's just out. There's nothing going across the middle of the field. There's no crossers, nothing past just basic comeback routes and go balls and fades, or passes to the running back in the flat.
Yeah, it must be frustrating to watch, especially for a rising star like Pickens. Steelers and their 2nd round wide receivers, name a more iconic duo. They really hit there, but if they're not manufacturing him space, only any receiver can only do so much for themselves on such a shallow route tree. Remember when DeAndre Hopkins went over to Arizona, and that was a big complaint there. They're calling it a route push, because he was running everything 5 to 10 yards out, staying on his side, and he couldn't create the separation. And it's freaking DeAndre Hopkins. So play calling's definitely an issue there. And I just want to hear from you. Aside from the play calling, where do you think you stand with your current personnel on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, so I think, our GM, Omar Khan, first year with him, and people were calling him, at least in the offseason, the con artist. He's gotten a couple good trades off. Obviously, the Claypool one comes to mind first. He's also built a very deep roster. And I remember you guys talking about the Steelers in the preseason, and I think he was at least, one of your underdog, dark horse favorites going in. And I think it's because they do have a very deep roster. Outside of the people like TJ Watt or Minkah Fitzpatrick getting injured, and even behind them, there's some depth. There is a really solid foundation of 1st and 2nd string players pretty much across the board. So I do like our roster.
Okay, all right.
I can talk about some of the rookies, because I think that's a big storyline for the Steelers.
Yeah, let me preface your the rookie conversation real quick. With there are this the Steelers defense is clearly superb. And it appears to be great across the board. But when you dig more into the numbers, it looks like the secondary, more specifically, the cornerback situation, really isn't looking too hot. Peterson, for instance, is he looks a little bit washed. He's allowed 16 receptions on 28 targets, allowing 15 yards per reception.
Sure.
Then Levi Wallace has been targeted 42 times. And besides that, you can give a little rundown on Joey Porter Jr., but he seems to be the only bright spot in the secondary right now, or at least in the cornerback room.
Yeah. And I think, some of the stats that you listed off about Levi Wallace and Patrick Peterson, I think that's why a lot of people are speculating about us trying to get Pat Surtain, which we can talk about later, which is insane. That's never going to happen. But so like you said, so in standard base packages this season so far, at least until the end of the last game, it's been Patrick Peterson outside, Levi Wallace outside, usually Chandon Sullivan in the slot. And then in some of the sub packages, third down sub packages, that's when Joey Porter has been brought in. And until last game, he had hovered around 10 to 35% snap count. Last week, he got above 40% for the first time. And I did see in an interview that Joey Porter was told at halftime, hey, you might be coming in, seeing some more playing time in the second half. So he was ready. To your point, Cameron, I think that is a weak spot. I think Joey Porter, I do expect to see more of Joey Porter replacing either Patrick Peterson or Levi Wallace sometime soon, hopefully after the bye week. But yeah, I mean, there's still potentially a weak spot. Hopefully with Joey Porter Jr. getting more playing time, we'll be able to minimize some of the weaknesses that Levi Wallace and Patrick Peterson have on the outside. Although Levi Wallace has had a couple interceptions, so he might be allowing, some yards, but one of those things where he's getting some splash plays as well. Yeah.
And then just real quick on the other side of the ball, the offensive line has not looked too good as a unit. I know their PFF grades, for instance, they're the second worst PFF grade, ahead of only the Giants in the league. Your offensive EPA right now is down at 30th, and a lot of that is because of the pressure that's being allowed. And Dan Moore, right, left tackle, he allowed 20 pressures so far this season, and it appears that he got, I don't recall if he was benched during week 4. I saw you had, I believe, 4 snaps that game.
He got injured.
Or if he got injured. Yeah. But, the rookie first-round pick, 14th overall, Broderick Jones, is playing in his spot. So if you want to shed some light on how he's doing.
Yeah, I know Steelers fans and probably other people who were picking the Steelers as a dark horse probably thought that the offensive line would see an improvement. I mean, we had a decent amount of continuity with Chucks on the right tackle, Dan Moore at the left, Mason Cole at center, and then our right guard as well. Left guard, we brought in Sumalo from the Eagles, who we definitely thought was an upgrade at that position. So there was a lot of optimism going into the season. I will say, I don't know if I fully trust PFF's grades there. I will say I think Kenny Pickett deserves some of the blame for a lot of the sacks and pressures and stuff that he's receiving. I know against the Texans, I believe every single time he was sacked, it was attributed to Kenny Pickett. It was not attributed to the offensive line. Kenny Pickett has looked scared the first couple of weeks and keeps spinning out of the pocket when he doesn't need to. So I guess I'm optimistic about the offensive line with Broderick Jones. I know he's gotten some pretty good PFF grades for pass blocking and run blocking, hopefully living up to, his first round draft pick. So I'm realistic that our offensive line has not looked great, but, optimistic.
Okay. And it's interesting that a lot of them were attributed to Kenny Pickett. Something I thought was funny. I was looking at quarterback EPA on the season so far, and he currently has negative 0.16 per play. And for reference, that is directly between Bryce Young and Zach Wilson, two studs this season. So, he clearly has not been playing the best on many metrics. However, clutch, some of those passes to Pickens have been. So yeah, I can see it going either way. I know that bringing in Samalu was a great great signing.
Mhm.
And Broderick Jones looks to be a great pick so far. And funnily enough, the Steelers almost always run the ball to the left side, and I can see why. I can see why.
Mhm.
Alex, you want to share any of your thoughts on the any side of the ball?
Yeah, no, I did think that it was kind of I mean, I certainly think that the Steelers, that they obviously create an immense amount of pressure on the defensive side, and you can see that, right? Even in those plays that don't result in sacks or tackle for losses, Watt and Highsmith and all those guys are flying around and really creating a lot of problems in the backfield. I did think that. Yeah, I didn't think this was a particularly good game out of Lamar Jackson. I think that's something to be mentioned as well. I think that there were some opportunities there for the Ravens to put that game away. And with some of the limitations on offense that I know you've talked about for the Steelers, probably another touchdown there in the second half probably would have put that game out of reach or close to it. So, I think that I will say I didn't have any skin in the game. Obviously, I'm a Chiefs fan, so I was just wanting to watch a good game. I did pick the Ravens to win the North, so we can talk more about that here and what the outlook looks like that. For that division as the year goes on. But overall, I mean, I thought it was a good game. I did see one thing they showed in the broadcast that I just thought was amazing was when they showed that the Ravens and Steelers have scored the exact same number of points going into this game than they had, over the went all the way back to like 2004 or something. It was like insane. Like the fact that they've scored the same number of points against each other in like 20 years. I mean, that is incredible. And I don't know, there can't be any other combination of teams that have consistently played one score games for 20 years. I mean, that's just unreal.
Yeah, that's wild. And, looking closer at that game, it's funny that you said Lamar Jackson didn't play well. A lot of the plays were not his best, but I believe he had the highest PFF grade on the week for any quarterback. He was over 94. And when you look at the Ravens receiving core, they had 7 drops that game.
They did,
which is the third most of any team in any single game since 2014. So they were not helping him out. And it wasn't just, dinks in the backfield where the running back would drop it. These are touchdowns. These are first downs. They're important plays. And, there is much as you want to give the Steelers credit, give them credit. They won the game, but the Ravens really beat themselves in this one as well.
And I think that's a good segue into my little list. I don't know, Cameron, if you saw it that I put here together, the first thing on my my list here. I have 3 players from this game that I never want to see on a football field ever again. And it makes me sad because I liked them, the 2 Ravens players coming out of the draft a lot. Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay. They both, Devin Duvernay had 1 bad drop. I think Bateman might have had 3, maybe 2. I liked Bateman coming out, and I never want to see him. I don't think the Ravens want to see him running routes out there either. And then Gunnar Olszewski on the Steelers. I cannot believe that he was a Pro Bowler at one point as a returner on the Patriots, because every single time that he is on the field for the Steelers, he makes a bone-headed play. He's had 3 fumbles in key moments over the years that I remember. And there was the play 2 weeks ago, maybe, where he toe tapped on a kickoff return to keep the ball in bounds, whereas he could have, just put 1 foot out, gotten the ball at 3. So I'm done with all 3 of those guys.
And just to shed light on the drop numbers you brought up earlier on this season so far, over the first 3 games, the Ravens were credited with 1 drop throughout the game, each game, none in game 4, and then 7 in the last game. And Mark Andrews accounts for 4 of those drops. And Zay Flowers 2, and then the rest are sprinkled among the others. But Mark Andrews with 4 drops is, that's not something you expect from him. He's seen as a superstar, but he's not the most athletic guy. And he's always been reliable. So very not like him, and he'll probably turn it around throughout the rest of the season.
I think so too.
Yeah, he's a good player. He's a good player. Go ahead.
Yeah, now the Steelers are on bye this upcoming week. So I want to ask you, before we move on to some of the other teams, what are you looking for throughout the rest of the season? What would make you happy as a fan?
I mean, I'm thinking playoffs. I'm thinking winning the division. So as far as results, that's what would make me happy. How I think we can get there is the rookies getting more playing time. So Broderick Jones keeping his position at left tackle and looking good. Joey Porter coming out of the bye, being the starter, minimizing Levi Wallace, Patrick Peterson's time. I think we need more out of our third receiver. I do not want to see Miles Boykin trying to catch balls for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'm open to, targeting receivers potentially in trade. And on the defense, I'm just excited to see Cam Hayward back for the second half of the season, maybe week 8, week 9. Mm-hmm. And then I would love to see TJ Watt and Minka stay healthy. As I said, I think that's a key. We have depth outside of that, but those two on the defense, I think, need to stay healthy.
Okay. And I just need to bring this up because it's been so unexpected, at least in my opinion. The offensive line has theoretically improved since last year. It was not the best last year. Mm-hmm. And I thought that means that first round running back Najee Harris would start to, finally have a season with over 4 yards per carry, but he's still down at that 3.9 mark. And from what I've seen, Jaylen Warren's looked a lot more explosive, a lot better. But in terms of yards per carry, he's sitting down at 3.6. I know he's had more luck more success through the air. But do you want to just talk about the running game and how that could be affecting this offense as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, Jaylen Warren is electric. Like, I don't know that there's anyone that gets from 0 to 100 quicker that I've seen in the league. Even, guys with elite acceleration. I don't know, Christian McCaffrey. I don't know if others come to mind.
Chris Johnson.
Yeah, throwback. So he's electric. He's coming in on different types of plays than Najee Harris. So, I think he's getting the outside runs. He's getting, the screens, garbage time throws a lot of times where it's easy for him to make plays. That said, he's making full, he's using those plays to their maximum extent. While I do blame Kenny Pickett for a lot of the heat that the offensive line is getting, on runs this year, I have seen so many clips of Najee Harris getting collapsed on by multiple defenders before he gets to the line of scrimmage. So I do think there's, I like the tandem of Harris and Warren. I hope that the run blocking will get better, but I do like the combination that we have currently.
Okay, I can see that. And, Najee Harris has had a few sneaky big plays. He has 16, 15 or more yard runs compared to Jaylen Warren's 2. I know he has a pretty darn good PFF breakaway percentage, 47%, which is very high. I know a lot of the league's leading backs are now a lot of them have a bit higher volume since they're splitting more time in Pittsburgh now between the two, but a lot of them have closer to that mid 30s mark. So there's some, he's getting some big plays. And then, as you said, he's getting swarmed in the backfield as well. So it just seems like watching them, they know what Matt Canada is going to do most of the time, and it makes it hard for anyone to have success.
Yeah, we'll see if he opens up the playbook at any point, but I'm not holding my breath.
All right, Alex, do you want to get into a little recap of some of the games over this last week?
It, Cam. It. So, of course, as we talked about, we're not going to go over everything this show, but we'll hit a couple things. So we obviously got to talk about our upset picks. So I was feeling really good about mine. Still a little salty, actually. So just as a reminder, I picked Houston over Atlanta. And for much of that game, it looked like, Houston was going to hang on and pull that game out. So a little bit of, it was a close game, but obviously Atlanta came back late, got the late field goal and pulled the win out there. So that drops my record to 2-3 on upset picks for the year. So I felt pretty, like I said, man, I thought Houston pulled that out, but even though Houston lost that game, I thought they looked good. And once again, CJ Stroud continues to impress. He certainly has a high level of poise. Of all the rookie quarterbacks, and even some of these guys that aren't rookies, but they're first year starters, CJ Stroud might look like the best. So, I think it's impressive of what they're doing down in Houston, and a little salty that they didn't pull it out for me, but it was still a good pick nonetheless. But that was the first one I wanted to start out with. What about you? Your pick for last week was the New York Jets over the Denver Broncos. Why don't you tell us about it?
And that one did pull through, so that puts me up to 3-2. Last week we were each 2-2, so a little bit of tension there. We didn't talk all week. It was rough. But the Jets, I've mentioned this before, but I'm in a little competition with some guys trying to select the high yardage leaders each week, and almost all of us chose Breece Hall separately for last week, and it worked out really well for all of us. He is completely carrying this offense, and it is rare that you can say a running back really makes an offense run. Blocking aside, he can beat the defenders to the outside. He cuts off angles. He can, on the inside, he can cut back across linemen who are putting on subpar blocks. He looks so much better than Dalvin Cook on the field. Dalvin Cook's career is over after this, after watching him next to Breece. So I think the Jets are looking better, after last week the week before against Kansas City. Zach Wilson looked a lot better. And I think the Jets are they're going to have some more sneaky wins. Now, the Broncos aren't a hard matchup by any means, but I do think the Jets are starting to look better as a unit. Now, just to talk about your game real quick, the Falcons-Texans, did you see that Bijan Robinson catch and run? Was that a touchdown? That was for a touchdown. He caught the ball behind his back without looking. I mean, his eyes were already upfield. He was already cutting while the ball was being caught behind his back. He is absurd, man. So the Falcons, Arthur Smith wants to just ground and pound, and that's what they're doing. Now, something about Jared here is he is a very big sports bettor as well. We're in a lot of various groups. He kind of got me into sports betting, puts many picks in each and every week. And since he was not part of this upset segment, do you want to shed a light on how any of your picks did this last week?
Yeah, as we were talking about before the show, I was in Las Vegas last week, so I had to get a little bit of sports betting on. I'd be lying if I, said that I actually believed that this pick would hit, but I was in one of the sports books in Vegas, and just for funsies, parlayed the Bears against the Commanders money line. So Bears money line and the over. So a little nervous until the end, but made a couple of units there. And sneak preview, my upset this week might involve the Bears as well. I'm bullish on them.
All right.
Yeah.
I wonder who your picks.
So your benefit there was at Cam's pain, right?
Correct.
Oh man. Yeah, but the Bears, oh man, that was not the most fun game to watch. Bears Commanders, got down 17-0 early on. Sam Howell's been sacked 29 times this season. We talk about the Pittsburgh offensive line being Swiss cheese, and Pickett's been sacked 14 times. It's like, oh, it's all, Kenny Pickett's fault. It's the line's fault. Sam Howell is 29. That's more than double. And just another fun fact, Dan Moore has allowed more pressures than any offensive lineman for the Commanders. So he's not completely at,
It's impressive.
It's pretty impressive. So I do not want to relive last week, but we'll definitely talk more about the Bears game and the Commanders game when we get into this upcoming slate.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, any other games stand out to you? Any surprises, any upsets that you want to talk about? Any players?
The other two games that I was obviously watching closely came out about as expected. So the Chiefs handled business against the Vikings. I was really impressed with the Chiefs defense. Really has been quietly a really solid unit this year. They had they did bracket Jefferson for most of that game, as they should, and as most other teams do. But I was really still continue to be impressed with Trent McDuffie. He's a guy that we've talked about a few times, Cam. I think he's an underrated cornerback, second-year guy out of Washington State. Just solid, real solid player. And, I think the Chiefs, I as a Chiefs fan, obviously, I feel like we're in a really good place because the defense is playing well, even with some injuries. Nick Bolton's been out a couple weeks, and he should be back soon. And then it's sort of like if the question about the Chiefs is, Are they going to figure out the passing game? I mean, it's Patrick Mahomes and it's Andy Reid. I mean, if that's the problem with this team, I'm not worried at all because they're going to figure it out. They got some young guys, some young receivers that have had some drops, but they're still figuring out how to get everybody going. Andy Reid and Mahomes will figure that out. So the Chiefs will be just fine in the long run. So that game, I thought it was an entertaining game. I thought the Chiefs, the score looks a little closer than probably it could have been. The Chiefs were up 2 scores late before the Vikings got one. But other than that, that game came out about like I expected. The other game was a little bit unexpected, but it was fun to see anyway. The Niners absolutely destroying the Cowboys.
It's always fun.
That was great to watch. I'm a Brock Purdy fan, so I love to see that. And I did pick that as the most. I thought that was going to be, one of the most exciting games of the week. I mean, the anticipation build up, that thing was done before halftime. I think I watched it through maybe like the third quarter. And then after the Niners scored again, and at that point, I think they were up like 30, 37 or something. I was like, I'm going to bed. I was like, I'm not going to stay up. I mean, as much as it is fun to watch the Cowboys get beat, I needed to get a little sleep. But, so that was a little bit surprising at how Cam, you and I both did pick the Niners to win, but the manner in which they won and with the astounding butt kicking was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and you weren't the only one who went to bed after the third quarter. Dak Prescott also decided to go
there
to bed
it is.
after the third quarter.
Yeah, absolutely.
As did I.
And I don't know if you guys saw some of the commentary. I mean, there was so much drama after the Cowboys 49ers game on both sides. Started with Micah Parsons talking trash, saying that, Cowboys and 49ers are actually on the same level, and that, it would shake out differently if they played again. And then 49ers players coming back, Debo coming back and saying, nah, they're scared of us. It would be even worse, next time.
Yeah.
And then about CeeDee Lamb, I don't know if you guys saw the interview with Jerry Jones, his weekly radio piece, where they, asked, hey, should CeeDee Lamb be getting more targets? And Jerry said, no, I would like to see it go to tight ends more. So interesting there. And then there's a couple media members too who are trashing on CeeDee Lamb, saying that he's not a bona fide wide receiver one.
That is interesting. He's always been an interesting player to me because it seems like the fantasy football community deemed that he was a top 5 star before he ever proved that he was.
Right.
And he's sort of been riding his draft capital and initial hype since then. And he's played very well. And he had that one catch last year against the Vikings. That was just unbelievable. But I've never seen him at that caliber of, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, these guys who are just, they can be their team. CeeDee Lamb still needs help, and he's really not getting it anywhere else.
Right.
And, the fact that Jerry Jones said that, honestly, that doesn't tell me much because it's Jerry Jones. But also, they have an array of tight ends who they brought in. They got Schoonmaker. I think it's Schoon. I know he's corrected people about it. I forget which way it went, but they drafted him in the 2nd round, which seemed to be a huge reach at the time to most people in the draft community. And a lot of people were on both Ferguson and Hendershot beforehand. And it's funny that I'm bringing up all 3 of these guys, and probably most people listening to this haven't heard of any of them at this point. They're not big names. And if Jerry Jones wants to get them involved, he can, but they're probably not going to be better than CeeDee Lamb. So, it's always fun to see the Cowboys lose, and to lose in this fashion was still exciting. But, they're having a weird season because they beat 3 teams that are supposed to have, roughly top 10 draft picks. And then they lost to a team that's going to have a top 10 draft pick in the Cardinals. And then they just get slaughtered here tonight. So, jury's still out on the Cowboys. It seemed like there were a lot of people's Super Bowl picks, especially after a couple weeks into the year. They might be as poor as average. They're definitely a good team, but how good is to be determined.
Yeah, I agree, Cam. I think that's a great way to put it. It's a great way to put it. Any other games that you want to chat about, or you want to move on to start looking forward to what we got coming up?
Let's move on, man. And we can start, we're recording this on Wednesday night, so we have under 24 hours until the Chiefs play the Broncos. So Alex, as our podcast Chiefs fan, why don't you take this away?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot to say other than, just got to remind people that the longest, right now the streak is at 15 games. So the Chiefs have beat the Broncos 15 straight times, which is pretty incredible. Now, I thought that was going to be like by far the longest active streak, but it's technically not. It's actually tied with the Patriots over the Jets, which is also at 15 games,
Oh, wow.
weirdly enough, which was another one that surprised me. But either way, this will push it to 16. I think the record, the last I checked, was somewhere around 20 in a row, and I think it was the the Dolphins over the Bills in like the 70s or something like that, back whenever the Dolphins were winning all the Super Bowls. But either way, it's exciting. That the Chiefs have been able to obviously win that many games in a row. Some of them have been close. Both of the ones last year ended up 1-score games. Although really, I think both of those weren't really 1-score games. The Chiefs definitely late in the season kind of let their foot off the gas a little bit and let the Broncos get back into it, but it was never really in doubt. So I think the score of the last year's games were a little bit deceptive, but I think the line is 10.5. At least is what I saw it. I think yesterday it might even be moving. But I think the Chiefs will win and cover, of course. I don't think this is going to be that close of a game. It is a short week and it's a short week division game, but I mean, the Broncos defense is so bad. It's 32nd in the league or 31st in a lot of metrics. It's so bad. And that's even if you take out the Dolphins game. I mean, even if you take out the Dolphins game, still it's one of the worst, it's one of the worst defenses in the league. And I got to think that Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid will find more than many opportunities to exploit that defense. So honestly, I don't think it's going to be much of a game. Maybe I'm wrong. You never know. Thursday night games can be ugly rock fights, but I do expect the Chiefs to take care of business and run away with it.
Yeah. I mean, you can't be that good of a team if you get scored on by the Jets in the manner that they were. So I do want to take a quick break here before we dive into these matchups, so we can get a chance to talk about our upset picks for this upcoming week. And because Jared started hinting at his earlier, I'm going to throw it over to him to go first.
Okay, let's get into it. If my computer could stop messing around. I already know my pick, so I don't need to look at it. As I hinted at earlier, I am going with the Bears again. I believe the Bears are at home, plus 2.5 against the Vikings. So the Vikings, obviously Justin Jefferson going on IR today, I believe.
Is that confirmed IR?
Believe so.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Okay. Justin Jefferson going to IR. With the team the Vikings not looking that great in general so far. Haven't liked how Madison and Akers have looked. And then I've been bullish on the Bears. I mean, I looked pretty dumb early in the season, but I liked what I saw last week against the Commanders. And they do so early in the season. The Bears the Bears defense looked very similar to what we've seen from the Broncos this season. Yeah. Horrible tackling, can't cover. They did have some early injuries. Jalen Johnson, their number one cornerback, and Eddie Jackson at safety, both have been injured for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Both are expected back. Jalen Johnson for sure. Eddie Jackson maybe questionable. So I expect that their tackling and defense will shore up here a little bit. Eberflus is a defensive coach, so I'm giving him some benefit of the doubt, expecting that the defense will look a little bit better. And if Justin Fields, looks like he did for most of the last game against the Commanders, I think they take it against the Vikings at home.
Yeah, I can see that. And Justin Fields, he's thrown 8 passing touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, right? So that is, I don't want to be boring here. I'm going to jump in. I did not know that you were going to pick the Bears. I picked the Bears as my upset pick. 2.5.
It's friendship.
We are on the same page. Alex, maybe you picked the Bears too. We'll see in a minute. But the over under is 44.5. There's a lot of bad juju, to be technical, going around the Vikings organizations. It seems there's a lot of talks about Kirk Cousins trading, but they're saying he's our guy, even though he's off the roster after this year, and they just worked out I believe 8 players a couple days ago, including I think Colt McCoy was the quarterback they were working out. So, this team is not where it wants to be. And I'm not sure they know where they want to be exactly as an organization. They're not going to win it all. And their quarterback is leaving. Therefore, what do you do? We've talked about it before on this pod, Alex, that teams in the NFL rarely actually tank. A lot of fans are like, oh, they're probably not going to win their division. Therefore, they should try to get a top pick. And that's just not how the NFL works, because they like money, and losses don't bring you money. So the teams that do tank, they're already bottom of the barrel. It's our, tank for Tua, right? Was the phrase back in 2020 before when Miami got, Tua. And, I just think that with everything going on with the Vikings right now, with Justin Jefferson going on IR, and how the Bears have played, the line kind of surprised me. And the Bears are at home too. So I think that I think it hits the over. I think it goes above 44.5. And I think the Bears take this one away rather handily. How about you, Alex? Did you also pick the Bears?
I did not, but I had to laugh because, of course, last week we talked about our best and worst division picks, and I talked about the Bears being one of my worst, which was before the game against the Commanders. But now maybe I was smarter than I know. So,
well, you asked for forgiveness. So
I did. I asked for forgiveness for the Bears pick. Maybe the Bears heard that and used that as motivation. So either way, I did not pick the Bears. So I'm picking a team that I'm picking against a team. Maybe you guys know where I'm going with this. That started off and honestly has looked terrible up until this last week. This last week they came alive and they looked great. They looked back to themselves. And so I think there's a lot of adjustments, maybe overreaction saying this team is back. I'm not so sure. So I am taking the Seattle Seahawks over the Bengals. Ooh. So right now the Bengals are favored by 3. I haven't watched that line to see how much it's moved, but they are favored by 3, and I'm going to take the Seahawks. And my thought process here, I know the Bengals finally looked better. Burrow looked healthier than he has all season. Kind of renewed that connection with Ja'Marr Chase, and obviously Ja'Marr Chase looked phenomenal in this last game. But are we really sure that the Bengals are back? I mean, that was the Cardinals, and the Cardinals have been kind of feisty, but they've also, let's be honest, the Cardinals, no one expects the Cardinals to win more than 3 or 4 games, if that. So, the fact that the Bengals beat up on the Cardinals, I think it was a step in the right direction, but do I think it means that they've arrived back as an elite team and one of the elite teams in the AFC? I don't think so. I think that the Seahawks are sneaky good. I think Witherspoon is super impressive. I really like watching that guy. They got some other great defensive backs, and once again, Geno, he's just chugging along. He's going to give what the defense gives him. He's going to take that, and I think they run the ball well. They do play physical. So I think that it's going to be a close game, but I'm going to take the Seahawks in this one.
I do like that pick. They're coming up their bye, right? And so they've had a lot more rest, and they have a very good offense. Now, I have not I did not watch the Bengals Cardinals game too closely. I need to go back, but from what I did see, Burrow seems to actually be stepping into his throws for the first time since the season began. He's actually able to put a little bit of zip on it, and his lower body mechanics are starting to shape back to how what's expected from him. And his arm's not bad, but it's not good compared to a lot of other NFL quarterbacks. So doing those makeshift throws over the first few weeks was really hindering the offense. I've already expressed how I don't love their play calling, and I don't think they always utilize their players to the best of their ability. But it seemed like this week he could air it out. And in Joe Burrow's mind, Ja'Marr Chase is the best wide receiver who's ever played the game.
He's always open.
And they have this connection from college, and they just, we can see it over the last couple of weeks. Ja'Marr Chase has gone absolutely bonkers. So this is a good segue into my other pick. My favorite pick of the week right now is taking the over in that game. I think that the Seattle comes off the bye and their offense looks more electric. And they crushed the Giants a couple weeks ago going into the bye, and that game looked effortless. Of course, it is the Giants, but with Joe Burrow coming back, I think that this game ends up being one of the more fun games to watch on the week. What about you? Do you
Perfect.
have any other any favorite picks of the week before we get into some of these matchups?
You
I
got
just
to
had
give
one
you
other.
got to give your upset pick, Cam.
No, I gave the Bears.
Yours is the
the
Bears as well. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, not much analysis on the only other pick I had listed here. It's just Saints -1.5 against the Texans. It's kind of just a feeling. Saints defense has been pretty good to elite all year. I think they continue to be underrated. I know Stroud has looked good the last couple weeks. Obviously, not quite as good last game, but I do think at some point Stroud comes back to earth, and I think there's a good chance it's against the Saints.
Okay. I mean, yeah, the Saints defense is looking great.
Yeah.
And Stroud, the whole offseason discussion about him was, will you get the CJ Stroud who played in the Georgia game, or will you get the CJ Stroud who played in every other game throughout his entire collegiate career? And so far, Georgia game was the most recent game. It was the highest pressure game, the highest stakes game, the best team he's gone against. And he played out of his mind. And he's been playing out of his mind for a rookie. And for really any NFL quarterback, he's been playing very well this season. So, someone who's on fire like that, it is hard to root against them. I can see why the line is where it is, but I also don't hate the pick because the Saints they just have a great defense. They have great defensive coaching as well, which elevates all of their players.
Mm-hmm.
I thought losing Davenport and a couple other offseason changes would have hurt their defense a lot more than it did. I expected them to be more of a middle of the pack group, but they're towards the top. All right, Alex, do you want to touch on some of these other games going into this upcoming week? And of course, give your favorite game of the week as you do.
Absolutely. I'd be more than happy to do that. So for this week, I actually, I know I've kind of had some of these weeks I've had a dumpster fire game, and then I've had a coach who doesn't get a plane ride home game. I'm going to combine those this game because there's only one I got to talk about here. And even one of those teams just won, but I still got to put them on there anyway. I'm talking about the Patriots and the Raiders. So the Raiders did win that game, but they should not have. That Jordan Love gave the game away. I mean, he just sometimes just where are you throwing the ball, man? Like, come on. So other than Max Crosby, this is not a good Raiders team. It's really not a good team, right? Max Crosby, I mean, I don't know who doesn't like that guy. He's fun to watch, and he's just a good guy. Got to root for him. But the Raiders just do not look good. Jimmy looks overwhelmed, and I still they're not good. And the Patriots are, man, it's painful. It's painful to watch that team at all. So I won't be watching them this week. So they're my dumpster fire game of the week. And and with that, I definitely think both of these coaches legitimately are on the hot seat, which is something I honestly never thought I would say about Bill Belichick. But I think the thing that makes Belichick on the hot seat not only is the fact that this team is just a total wreck and nowhere forward for them to get to really improve, but he's just like that stubborn old guy that he's not going to leave unless they make him. And so I feel like at some point Robert Kraft, it's not going to be a sayonara, like a great just watch Bill ride off in the sunset. When this thing comes crashing down, which I think it's on the way right now, it is going to be a Bill is forced out the door, and he'll probably have some snarky, nasty things to say on the way out. And that's where we're headed. So, who knows? Robert Kraft might accidentally forget to get a plane ride home, for Bill Belichick. So that's my dumpster fire / coach is not going to get a ride home game. What do you think?
I'm going to push back on something you said there real quick about Belichick, because you have to think about it as two guys. There is the head coach Belichick, defensive head coach Belichick, and there's GM Belichick. And Bill Belichick has never been great at constructing rosters throughout the course of his tenure. He focuses on defense, and he has Tom Brady. And there was that whole discussion on, Tom Brady versus Belichick, who's going to do better when they separate. And that's not really fair, because Belichick loses the best quarterback of all time, and Tom Brady goes to one of the best teams in the league at the time, right? So Belichick's defenses have always been great. They're still great. They're still innovative, oddly enough. The way that they, as you've pointed out on the podcast before, they're talking about seeing ghosts out there in Belichick's defense. He still has that coaching, but he wants to build his roster like it is 2005, and you just can't do that.
And I will say the two things he does do well as a GM, so maybe if he could just step aside and do those two things, is drafting and developing DBs, right? JC Jackson, Stephon Gilmore, even going further back.
Christian Gonzalez,
of course, already looking great. And then finding the, scrappy gym rat, lunch pail type of wide receivers.
Right.
Other than that, his GMing has not been great.
No. So I do think that he is stubborn, and I don't think he does allocate his deficiencies to someone who may be better, and therefore maybe the team's not going to be looking up too far. But Mac Jones is not looking good. The wide receiver core is not looking good. And with that, you can't establish a run game, which they like to do. And so it looks like a dumpster fire, and which, that's your dumpster fire game of the week. Now, there is a funny parallel that I wanted to bring up because you talked about the Green Bay game last week and how Jordan Love was just completely gave the game away. And we're talking about how CJ Stroud has just been lighting it up for the Texans this week. And Jared here said this might be the week where he calms down. Well, over the first few weeks, Jordan Love was the most efficient quarterback in the league regarding touchdowns per throw, per attempt. And he was really just playing very well besides his completion percentage. And he did come back down to earth. So after thinking about that a little bit more, I'm starting to get more on board with Jared's pick. They're different players, different schemes, different coaches, but and at the end of the day, their regression takes over the league. Now,
it's true.
I want to talk about the game that you probably will not be watching this week because you hate the Panthers. I'm still watching Bryce Young. He still looks like the worst of the rookie quarterbacks who are starting. And by worst, I do of the rookie quarterbacks and not including Aiden O'Connell because he was not drafted to start, right? I'm talking about just the top three. And we talked about this last week a bit, how he's still sort of calibrating to the speed of the league. He was always a calculated player, a player who understands the game very well, understands the situation, and plays with a lot of anticipation, a lot of timing. And he was always good at that. Now, the offense is not constructed for his play style currently, which everyone knew going into it. So if you just take a step back and look at the bigger picture of this team, yes, Bryce Young isn't playing that well, but he never was going to because he doesn't have he has the physical limitations that quarterbacks like, Anthony Richardson just don't have. Anthony Richardson can get away with things because he's an athletic freak. Bryce Young needs things to be in place, and he has a very high ceiling. I still think he does. It's only been 5 weeks. I think he has a very high ceiling when he has the right weapons around him, the right style of offense, and I just don't see that happening this season. So I'd say if you're a dynasty fantasy football player, go ahead and pick up Bryce Young this offseason because I don't think he looks too good throughout this year. But I do think that, you can't really write him off until a couple seasons are under his belt based on what we already knew going into the draft. And then the other side of this game, Miami, not much to say there. They're going to smoke them. I mean, they're just going to light the Panthers on fire. And I think the line is 13 and a half-ish. Last time I checked, it was around there. I think they could cover very easily.
For any Panthers fans out there, I mean, I feel like if you have a rookie quarterback, especially one that's not, you're not winning games, you're looking for flashes, right?
Right.
I haven't watched enough Panthers to know if Bryce Young has flashed. Has he shown anything to you that shows that he could be the guy?
He's very clearly in his own head. He is. I believe he's come out and said that he's second guessing himself, and that's just not. I mean, you go back and everyone makes a big deal about college quarterback scouting. Says, can you even scout quarterbacks? I mean, the NFL is always wrong, etc. There's Brock Purdy's, there Carson Wentz's. He was a fine pick, but that's a different topic. And I'd say with Bryce Young, you go back and watch him at Alabama, and he is doing things definitively that he is not doing in the NFL. The placement of his throws, his timing, his dropbacks, his mechanics, everything's a little bit off. So I think for the fans watching and wondering why he's playing so poorly and really not flashing as much as you'd like, it comes back to that calibration. I'm going to stand by that until he proves me otherwise a couple years down the line, because he will get mechanics are a thing that if he has them, he should be able to have them. It doesn't just all go away now that he's playing on a different in a different stadium. So I think that this team, you know, they brought in a bunch of stud coaches over the offseason. I think they have a smart franchise, and I think they're going to be good, but they have their work cut out for them without having a first round pick next year and without having a lot of talent or young talent on the roster. All right, Alex, give me another one. What else are you looking forward to watching this upcoming week?
Yeah, another game that I think could be pretty interesting is going to be the Monday night game. So the Cowboys and the Chargers. I still think that the Chargers are one of the more talented teams in the league. I know we've talked about quite a bit. I still think Brandon Staley is hanging on for dear life for his job. I think that as soon as there's a better coaching option out there, or even really if this team continues to underperform, I think that he's going to get kicked to the curb. So I'm curious to see how he coaches against Mike McCarthy's Cowboys. Obviously, the Cowboys you would think are going to have a bounce back game, and probably come out swinging. You would think. But at the same time, it's the Cowboys. So as we've talked about, they've beat up on bad teams and they have lost to and got destroyed by the one really good team they played. I think the Chargers are somewhere in the middle. They're not bad. I wouldn't say they're elite either. So I think it'll be a close game. It could actually be an entertaining game for sure. So, and I always like, Justin Herbert, and he's worth the price of admission, a guy to come and watch play. So I think that'll be a good game.
Yeah, and you almost called them the Dallas Micah Parsons. We heard that. You can't sneak one over on us. Jared, what about your thoughts on this Monday night game?
Yeah. So the Chargers are the only team from a betting perspective that I always fade myself on. And it's a learned behavior. I've bet on the Chargers. I've gotten my hopes up way too many times, thinking that they're going to win games that they should. This game, I don't think they're going to win. I do think it's a get-right game for the Cowboys. But the Cowboys, like you said, have had an interesting schedule that makes me doubt them as well. So like you said, Alex, I'm just excited to see what happens. Derwin James is likely back this week for the Chargers, so maybe their defense will look a little bit better. It's a presence, pretty much everywhere with Derwin. So
now, how much of this offense do you think is a result of, or their deficiencies are a result of coaching versus personnel and execution?
It's hard. It's always hard to tell, what the influences of a head coach. I will say, coming out of the gate when Staley started, he was the, Riverboat Ron, equivalent, but for Brandon Staley, he was always going for it on crazy fourth downs. Mm-hmm. I feel like Staley's kind of lost his identity, and I feel like is he a defensive coach? Do you know?
Yeah, defensive.
He's a defensive coach. So I don't know. I feel like he's underperformed. His defense has underperformed. He doesn't have an identity anymore as far as we're always going to go for it type of guy. So yeah, I don't have much confidence in Staley either.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Now, I want to touch on just a couple of these other games before we hit the road and are able to actually start watching this week's football. Games we haven't really talked about: the Ravens, Titans. Anything special about this game you see?
Yeah, it's the game across the pond, so I know it'll be on. I don't think I'll be able to watch that game because or at least I'll see it while I'm getting ready for church. But it's a morning game, so the Titans. I don't know, man. I don't even know what I think about them. They seem like they want to bully teams and play physical. But like some weeks, you see them and you're like, hey, that actually looks like they should be a team in contention. And then the next week they, end up looking terrible. So, it's strange. I mean, this was a close game this last week, but a loss to the Colts, where they certainly had chances to get away with that game. So I don't know. I mean, if you go by their win-loss, they win one, lose one, then next up they should win. So I don't know. There you go.
It's the best analysis there is.
That's right.
And, I think what you said about the Titans, how they're very hot and cold, really reflects where this team is as an organization. I think it's good coaching and a lack of talent. And when you have good coaching and a lack of talent, the players sometimes will flop and the scheme will sometimes come through, and that can really lead to hot and cold performances. So I could see this game going either way, but I would definitely give this one to the Ravens. It's this is the third week in a row we have a London game starting at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. Do you know if that's how often that's going to occur throughout the season? I don't think we have one next week.
No, I don't. But then in 2 weeks we have a couple Germany games, so I think those are going to be at the same time. So actually, one of the best ones I think is going to be the Chiefs and the Dolphins in 3 weeks is in Germany. So that's going to be a Sunday morning game, and if both of these teams keep winning, they could be both of them could be like 7-1 or 8-1, whatever week it is, going into that game. So that should be a good one for sure.
Oh, that's going to be a great game. All right, now I want to talk about this game real quick, the Commanders and Falcons, because I don't even know what to expect really from the Commanders, which is odd because I follow them so much more closely than any other team. And I know exactly what to expect from the Falcons. The Falcons defense is very okay. They're better than a lot of people thought. And a lot of that is attributed to young players taking a step forward. Last season, Arnold Ebiketie, Troy Anderson, they were not very good. And they're playing better. They're not superstars. They're playing better. And they brought in, every position across the board from last season, offense and defense, either maintained where it was in terms of personnel or theoretically improved. Therefore, this team is pretty improved. And they run the ball on offense and they keep possession, and that's it. Now, the Commanders, they play great against the Eagles. They play horribly against the Bears. And that's just how this team's always worked. They beat the Eagles last year when the Eagles were 11-0. They lost to the 0-21 Lions back in the early 2010s. And that's just kind of, those are the extremes. But this team has always been unpredictable. Now, under the Dan Snyder era, now Dan Snyder's gone. But Ron, I don't know if either of you have heard any press conferences with Ron Rivera, but he is completely checked out. It's crazy. He was asked, I saw one just yesterday. He was asked the question, you drafted all these rookies, you brought in all these players. Your rookies aren't contributing. The only player who's played is Emmanuel Forbes, who has looked awful.
Got benched.
Yes, he's looked terrible. What do you see, with these rookies you brought in, and why aren't they getting playing time? And then he started talking about Sam Howell. And it was just weird. He said, well, with the young quarterback and Sam Howell, he's really starting to grow, and the team's revolved around him. And it was just such a nothing answer. So it seems like he's gone at the end of the season. Del Rio, defensive coordinators, definitely gone at the end of the season with how many resources have been allocated towards that defense and how much they are underperforming. He has to be out. I know the fan base really wants Eric Bieniemy to just be appointed head coach and him to work with the GM or bring in a new GM even to sort of build the coaching staff from there. I don't know if they're just going to appoint him head coach after a lackluster season, but that is definitely to be determined. So with this game, I think the Falcons win because they're a team. They don't make, aside from Desmond Ridder, just being himself, I don't think they make a lot of mistakes. I think they run the ball very well, and they're just going to maintain possession and wait for us being the Commanders to turn the ball back over to them. So whether they win by 2 points or 3 points, as they keep doing, I think the Falcons take this one. All right.
Can't argue with that.
Sorry, what was that?
I said I can't argue with that. That's good analysis.
Yeah. All right. Now, anything else you want to touch on, Alex, before we let these people get back to their lives?
Yeah, I have one last question for Jared because we asked our last guest this as well. I know you mentioned you're only hoping for playoffs right now, but if somehow Steelers pull it together and win that Lombardi Trophy, what are you going to do if the Steelers win the Super Bowl?
What am I going to do? I'm down to go on a trip to Bali or something like that, because I do have a future on the Steelers. $50 to win, I don't know, 3,000 or something. So if the Steelers win the Super Bowl, I'm bringing you guys all out on a trip with me. How about that?
Hey, there we go. I like that.
In your $3,000 budget.
That's right. I was expecting, a tattoo of Kenny Pickett, but a trip sounds a lot better.
Yeah, good for the crew.
Sounds like more fun. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us this time. Jared, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I was hoping as a fan of the show that I could ask you guys maybe a question each just to throw this up. So Alex, as a Chiefs fan, how do you see the Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver core shaping up? Are you interested in, like, I know people have been throwing out Mecole Hardman, hasn't been getting time with the Jets. Would you be interested in reinforcing, or do you think, one of the receivers is gonna step up?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Jared. I do think that Brett Veach is very, he's a savvy GM, so he's always out looking for bargains and deals. So I think I'm sure he'll make some calls, but honestly, the Chiefs have like zero cap space. I mean, they have no cap space. So if it's somebody coming, with a pretty sizable contract, it's just not going to happen. So I do think that, the Chiefs have definitely started, I think that we need to see a higher snap count from Rashee Rice. He's been effective. I know Cam, we've talked about him a little bit. He's been excellent against zone. Hasn't been great against man, but he also hasn't had a lot of snaps, a lot of chances, I think, to run against man and actually get some targets. So I think that, I think he has been efficient when he's been out there. So I think he needs to really start to see an increase in the snap count. And then they also, Justin Ross was actually out there and had a beautiful snag in that game against the Vikings. Now, his route tree is still pretty limited right now. I think they're still kind of bringing him along. But I mean, he's been healthy when he had a couple drops too, but I think they're trying to get his snap count up as well. And they're also kind of stashing Kadarius Toney, like he's there, but they're really not using him a whole lot. And I think part of that is because he is one of the more electric players they have. And I know that he's like a porcelain doll. So they're going to try to keep him on the shelf probably until late in the season when they really need him. And then all of a sudden it'll be like, wait, Kadarius Toney's really good. Where did this guy come from? Well, they were kind of keeping him stashed for a lot of the year. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do go after a wide receiver at the trade deadline, a veteran wide receiver. But I also know it's got to be somebody on a bargain deal that a team's just getting rid of to try to clear a little space, because the Chiefs don't have a lot of space. So otherwise, they might just roll with it and they'll say, here you go, Patrick Mahomes, make this a winner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I brought this set up last week, just an updated version for Rashee Rice against man coverage. He has caught 1 reception on his 6 targets, and against zone, he's 14 of 14. So he's finding space in zone, and that's on not a very high snap count, as you brought up. So yeah, I think he will continue to get more reps throughout the season. I know the hope is that he develops into the sort of alpha X type of receiver. He doesn't play in that role right now, especially with that offense not needing traditional roles with the way they run through Kelsey or operate through Kelsey, and how Mahomes can just find guys in Andy Reid's incredible play calling each and every year. But if he can develop into a guy who can play a traditional X role, I think it'll help you guys a lot. Our preseason bet of Rashee Rice for Sky Moore, where I took the Sky Moore side, is looking to be in your favor. So that's a good question, because this receiving core is completely up in the air even this far into the season.
And then my question for you, Cameron, is just a yes or no question. Actually, you could play it as one. As a Commanders fan, is Sam Howell the guy?
Yep.
Okay.
That's it. Here's what I'll say. He is playing. He is flashing a lot. So you have to treat him as a rookie. Oh, sorry. Yes or no question. I'll elaborate. He's playing. He's flashing as you would want a rookie to flash. He's playing well in high pressure situation. When he rolls outside of the pocket, he keeps his eyes downfield. He goes through progressions. I think he is getting pressured so much, and he wants to make plays happen. Therefore, he's holding onto the ball, because it's one of those situations where even when you get pressured, you want to throw the ball away. But if you're getting pressured so much, you feel like you have to do everything yourself, and therefore it stacks on top of each other. And I think it's forming sort of bad habits. I did not like how they tried to reconstruct the offense over the offensive line over the offseason, and it's really showing and what kinds of plays they can run. A lot of what Eric Bieniemy likes to do is a lot of these layered concepts, the short West Coast offense to end up getting guys open downfield, but a lot of the downfield concepts aren't working because there's just no time. So I think for what he's been given, he's playing very well. And I think it would not be smart to move away from him and put another quarterback in the same situation. So if they get a top 2 pick, sure. If you want a stud quarterback, you get yourself a stud quarterback, especially since Terrace just bought the Commanders this year.
Mhm.
Go get his guys, build it from there. But if you're sitting in the, picks 7 to 13, where they probably are going to end up,
Mhm.
reaching for a quarterback just because Sam Howell had poor box scores, I think is foolish. Roster construction. But yeah, I think
Agreed.
Sam Howell is a guy. If you get good, if you get this offensive line fixed and you still have your weapons at that point in time, maybe next season, maybe 2 seasons from now, and
Mhm.
Sam Howell is not performing to the level you want, then you can go and get a new quarterback.
I agree with that. Okay, that's all I got.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining this week. If you were live on YouTube, hey, everyone. And if not, you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Have a great time watching football this weekend, and we will see you next week. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.